We're live.
Sweet.
All right. Welcome. Against all odds, we're here. Can you hear me? Everyone can hear me okay? We're good?
Yep.
Yeah, you're good.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, broadcasting live from my car because I don't have internet or power at my place. So
Still.
we are still.
There's still no power?
Jeez.
Yeah.
That sucks.
Yeah, I'm out in the boondocks a little bit, so they don't really care about us, I think. That's my conspiracy. That's my Channel Zero conspiracy theory. It's, they're taking care of everyone, all the cities first, and they'll work their way out, I think. But last I checked, nothing. So
yeah,
I'm in my car. Hopefully, you guys let me know if it gets choppy or anything. But I think it's all right.
No, it's really good.
You're good.
So week 2, I guess officially we are the history buffs, which makes sense. Obviously, we know what we're doing. We are discussing today World War II. We got a couple different topics, few different questions we're going to go over. I guess I'll start briefly with just a background on World War II, real brief background. If you're watching
I feel like
this,
a lot of people know about World War II.
I think so.
We can minimalize the background
about it. Took place basically. Germany was really pissed off after World War I. Hitler came into power. They tried to take over again, and that's basically how World War II starts. All right. So I guess unless anyone has anything else they want to jump in on or start with, we can get right into the topic questions. I think
Germany loses. It's the 75th anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima.
Yep. Today. Yep.
So
yes.
our topics are going to be: why did Germany lose, and why did the U.S. drop the second bomb?
Right. So we'll start right there. Again, as already said, if you're watching this, you're a fan of history, you probably know at least a little bit about World War II. Germany is obviously going to really kick it all off with the invasion of Poland with help from Russia. That's going to be in 1939. England, France declare war. Nothing really happens for the rest of 1939 into 1940. Then Germany turns its blitzkrieg attack to the west, takes over basically all of Western Europe, and really by late spring, early summer 1940, has essentially the entire European continent under its control. All right, then it goes down into North Africa. Battle of Britain's going on during this time as well, 1940, 1941. Operation Barbarossa will be 1941 as well, when Germany attacks the Soviet Union. They get as far as Stalingrad and the River Volga, deep into Soviet territory. That's late 1942, 1943, and really from winter, spring 1943, you have Germany getting pushed back, and by obviously by May 1945, Germany, the war is essentially over in Europe. So we're going to talk about, discuss, and might have some disagreement as to why that happened. Why did Germany go from being so powerful, being a country that literally was unstoppable for the first couple of years of the war, to really a shell of themselves and on the retreat for years up until World War II ended in 1945. So I'm curious to hear what you guys got. Let's start with RA. What do you got? Why did Germany lose World War II?
So I think the biggest reason is Hitler himself. That's what I'm going with. He had way too much control over the military operations. He had his hands in everything. He doesn't have a military background. He's a failed artist. He was in World War I. He was gassed, but besides that, not a whole lot going on in his background. He's all these generals. He's got the biggest army in the world at the time, and he can't do anything with it. He's interfering, like I said, when Operation Barbarossa, he issued a no retreat order, which just left hundreds of thousands, entire armies were just engulfed. So there's nothing he could do about it. He had some failed offensive in Stalingrad, Kursk, like the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge, and then in Hungary also in like 1945-ish.
Right.
Were just disastrous, and his generals couldn't stand up to him. There was different plots. There was like Valkyrie, and then not only like his military stuff, but just like he spent $2 billion trying to develop nerve gas, which he was able to do, and his generals wanted him to use it, but he refused to use it. Like it just like stuff, so it just like crippling his own economy, and then it was the other and D-Day, he took control of the panzers in Normandy from Rommel.
Yep.
So during D-Day, the other famous story is that he slept in because he
Right.
thought that it was the fake invasion, like leading up to the big invasion. So there's a lot of stuff that he could have done that he, had he just deferred it to the to his military generals.
Yeah.
And also one last thing before I stop ranting is there's anti-Semitic. A lot of the best scientists in Germany were Jewish. So like Albert Einstein's the most notable one, but a lot of the intellectuals, a lot of the people who worked on the Manhattan Project were refugees from Germany.
Yeah.
So Hitler just fucked it up.
Yeah, that's something I didn't think about. The Holocaust, I kind of separate those two with the genocide versus actual World War II, at least in my mind. But yeah, just think about all the resources you have with that in general. Just shipping people around, using train cars for moving people instead of supplies. You have guards at all the camps. I mean, that's thousands of people that are being reallocated for something that's not fighting the war.
Right.
So yeah, all really. So what you're going with Hitler overall, Aria?
Hitler fucked it up. If it wasn't for Hitler, they would have had a fighting chance.
Fair. Ned, what do you got?
Well, Hitler was going to be my first, but I was going to go with the lack of a strong navy was the second, because I had a feeling if I didn't go first and didn't grab Hitler as my number one answer, somebody else would. So the backup was in my mind was the navy, and it's debatable, but Germany had a very strong navy, battleship size. They didn't have aircraft carriers like the U.S. did. Battleship was the way to go for all the major naval powers at the time. Although the U.S. began to develop the flat top, the aircraft carrier. But it took, we can have a discussion on that later too, Pearl Harbor to knock out the U.S. Pacific Fleet with the battleships, making the aircraft carrier the preeminent ship. Yep. So Germany was fighting mostly Britain and some of the U.S., but they had a pretty damn good navy, and they did not utilize it to its maximum potential, especially in the Mediterranean. They should have, I'm not an admiral, but I can't imagine why they didn't stop the Armada at D-Day. Just by setting up a line of ships to just stop. It's only 22 miles wide, like a physical blockade, and just have a war there. Those weren't warships; those are transport ships. So it would have taken air cover, which in 44 the Luftwaffe was still in pretty good shape. I think they weren't knocked out completely, but they were badly damaged.
The issue was they were so focused on the Eastern Front at the time. There really wasn't a whole lot of Luftwaffe left looking over, because he figured, you have the Atlantic Wall.
Right.
In Hitler's mind, the Battle of Britain failed using the Luftwaffe. Right. Planes don't work here. Let's move them over to the Eastern Front.
Right. Well, he couldn't bomb them into submission. In Operation was it Overlord? No. What was
No, Overlord was D-Day.
No. What was the one?
Sea Lion was the
Sea Lion. Thank you.
That was supposed to be the
Sea Lion was the invasion of England. Right.
Yep.
But he failed to knock them down. The Battle of Britain and the British Air Force did a great job, but he still had a pretty good navy in my opinion, because I really haven't read anything that he didn't. And a lot of stuff I read on World War II, like there weren't really huge naval battles except for and my mind just went blank with the Bismarck. The English sunk the Bismarck, but that was their flagship. Okay, but they still had others. So to me, it's inconceivable that during D-Day they knew it was coming from a huge general direction. Why didn't he just run a row of ships, warships? Could be battleships, could be submarines, could be anything. But from the Netherlands all the way down to the French. They knew they were coming from England, so you didn't have to go too far down to Brittany or somewhere. Didn't make any sense to me. So I think his either he didn't trust his admirals, like he didn't trust his generals. Or they just didn't seem to utilize a pretty good asset, I thought, especially in the Mediterranean.
And in his mind, what are you saving them for, too? Because once they're on continental Europe, what are you going to use them for?
Yep, they weren't in the Pacific. There was no German Pacific fleet because they lost all their possessions in the First World War, and they might have had something in Africa, maybe, but not much. So you're right. No, and I don't think he deployed them. I just don't think he deployed it. He even could have used them in the Mediterranean to stop the U.S. invasion of Africa when the Brits were already there, and then was Patton. It was the first time the U.S. troops were deployed overseas in World War II was into Africa, into Libya, and he didn't use them there either. They got more. Actually, the U.S. got more flack from the Free French, from the Vichy French, than they did from the Germans. Yeah. So I think his lack. Hitler is the overriding one, the invasion of Russia. But I'll have to go since RA. I don't want to jump on RAs, but I would have to go with the proper deployment. Proper deployment of the Navy, I think, is a major reason why he lost.
or lack thereof too. And I'll get to you in a second, Austin. But a very interesting part, and Ned, I don't know, I feel like you might have at least read something about this because it's kind of an obscure part of World War II that I think you especially would like. The German U-boat commander.
Yeah.
And I forget his name, but by the end of the war, the U-boats were basically running their own show.
Yep.
They had their own bases up
The
in the
Wolfpack.
Nordic countries. They're still running their their Wolfpack attacks on the convoys coming over from America, or from even sometimes from England to different parts of Europe. They were running those attacks pretty much up until World War II ended.
Right.
So there's definitely a disconnect between the German Navy and the U-boats and the U-boat commander, and obviously between Hitler and the U-boat commander himself.
And to give credit where credit is due, prior to the U.S.'s entry into war, and they were secretly or with very little secrecy, bringing over, arming and feeding the U.K. and Europe where they could. Right, those weren't warships; those are transport ships, or even passenger liners in some cases, which is even more dangerous. Those are sitting ducks for U-boats, submarines. Mm-hmm. So later on, when U.S. officially entered the war and started doing warships, well, now you have depth charges, and you can take some countermeasures against a U-boat attack. Though they are still, a huge menace, and remain so today. The submarine is probably the most lethal weapon for anyone's navy.
Yeah, absolutely, especially with the nuclear capabilities now. And all
correct.
That. You don't know where they're coming from. They could be anywhere in the ocean. You don't know where they're coming from.
Correct.
All right, so we got Hitler as a whole. We got the misuse of the German Navy. Austin, what do you got?
So mine's like lack of infrastructure. So by the end of the war, Germany just had no oil left. They couldn't keep control of the oil fields in North Africa. They couldn't keep control of the oil fields in Western Russia.
The Caucasus,
Yeah. So like
Czech Republic.
Yeah. So by the end of the war, the Tiger tanks were being used basically just sitting artillery instead of these massive tanks rolling over the American and the Russian armies. And on top
That's
of
a really
that,
good point.
Yeah. So, and then on top of that, a big point of the invasion into Poland and everything was to get farmland to feed their people. A big goal is to basically wipe those people out and move Germans over there to then feed their people. But they weren't able to accomplish that either, so they weren't able to feed their people or their army. So just a lack of infrastructure, I think, really just quickened the pace of their demise.
Yep.
Definitely. And going off, everyone thinks of Germany in World War II. They think the blitzkrieg, tanks, mechanized infantry, all that. Germany essentially still was very reliant on horse and carriage and in their supply chains. Yeah, Hitler put all the emphasis in the frontline troops. That a lot of troops that were reserves were basically walked all across Russia. They walked all the way there, and then during the retreat, basically walked all the way back. There was not a lot in terms of supply lines. There really was not a lot of trucks and real trains that were for supply trains and different ways to move weapons, munitions, people quickly. That really didn't. They really didn't have that compared to the other Allied countries because Hitler was so focused on things like tanks and having the best tanks and armor and all that.
Don't you guys remember the movie Patton, where after a battle, Patton's like, I know they're finished, and then how General, and he's it's the carts and the horses. They're moving. They're wounded with carts and horses. They're finished. Mm-hmm. And he's right. I love that movie, by the way. I hope you both have seen it. I know. I'm sure RA has.
A long time ago.
Great movie.
Believe it or not, I've not seen it.
Wait, what?
I've not seen it. I've not seen Patton. I know it's on my to-do list.
Before your bachelor party in Tennessee,
I thought I mentioned that.
Up in the Smoky Mountains. By the way, where is that going to be? Where in Tennessee?
Like an hour away from Knoxville.
In which direction?
North.
Oh, okay. Because I did a year at East Tennessee State University in Johnson City.
It's not
40 minutes. 40 minutes east of Knoxville.
That's near like West Virginia, right?
No, it's nearly North Carolina.
Oh,
get your geography correct.
Toward the east.
Yeah. Anyway, so you should definitely carve out some time.
I know. I gotta watch Patton.
Yeah.
I'm gonna watch him slap around some people.
Yeah.
Oh, that they cover it.
Oh yeah. But anyway, yeah, the lack of infrastructure is actually I didn't even think of that one with the oil because the oil reserves in in I can't remember, in Crimea. That was crucial to Hitler, and he didn't get them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I know. I've read in other places. I can't tell you where right now, but that they would have probably lost the war anyways because they had no oil. They had an issue with oil. But that's a good point. I've heard that before.
Well, that was a big part of their big push for the Battle of the Bulge. That kind of last ditch effort they had, with if you've seen Band of Brothers, where they surround Bastogne and hold the line and all that. That last ditch attack for the Battle of the Bulge, they were trying to capture American and British oil fields.
Yeah,
that was their main objective, because they had nothing left for their tanks.
And get to the ports. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So I guess for me, I'm kind of gonna go a little bit off of what Austin said, in terms just at least talking about oil, but that kind of revolves around the attack on North Africa. So in my mind, you have Hitler take over, obviously Poland first, and then the rest of Europe by summer 1940. Battle of Britain doesn't really work. It's like Hitler needed some ADHD medication, right? He attacked Britain for a little bit, that didn't work. So then he goes to North Africa, and then he goes to Russia. Like, pick one. At the height of his army, when America wasn't even in the war yet, right?
Yep.
He jumps around onto essentially 3 different continents, because but where he got in Russia is basically Asia. He's essentially over the Middle East, right? He's just north of the Middle East. If he just left Africa alone and waited and used a great German general like Rommel properly, instead of wasting him in North Africa, and then when the English started pushing back a little bit, he didn't give him any reserve troops or any extra fuel. He basically told him to hold the line without any help. So he basically left one of his best generals out to dry. If he just waited, and if he knew he was going to attack Russia anyway, why not use all those troops, all those resources in that attack? And then you can, if you really need the oil, just go down through the Caucasus like he was planning on doing anyway. And guess what? Once you have that part of Russia secure, once you have, Russia reeling like he did, you can go all the way down into the Middle East if you want, and then get into Africa, coming on the Egypt side if you really wanted to. I mean,
correct.
The only reason he did it, I think, was out of pride, because he couldn't take over England itself. He couldn't take over the UK itself. So he attacked British colonies down in North Africa, and his pride, already going to your point a little bit, his pride got him in trouble a whole bunch. I mean, he was on his way down to the Caucasus, and then he saw a city on a map called Stalingrad.
And why did he take it because it has Stalin in the name?
And he ends up losing over 100,000 troops in his whole 6th Army.
Yeah.
So
what was it?
It's a combination of the ADHD medication and but the biggest example of that to me is Africa. And his attack on Africa.
And the Ribbentrop-Molotov compact or pact of, was it 1939? So neither side decided not to attack each other, but they split up Poland. That was I think his most stupid blunder was. I mean, it's tempting, but he violated that by invading Russia. He really had no one behind him at all up until he violated his. And was it 1940? December 1940?
Yeah.
Or 41 maybe?
June of 41.
June of 41. And it was really stupid of him, I think, to do that. I don't know if he did it. I've never read if he did it or he was counseled to do it. But I think, his frustration of not bringing England to heel, and Africa was also had oil reserves, of course, right? Libya as well. And that was progressing. But for some reason, he attacked Russia when he had them to his back with nothing to worry about.
Well,
completely on Europe.
And Mein Kampf, like his entire thing is he hates communism.
He hates communism, correct?
He hates communists. Correct. So he honestly just like lays out his World War II game plan in back in 21 or 23, whenever he wrote it. So that's why he wanted to invade Russia, because that's what he wanted to do since day one.
And it's a shame, because we had Steve Robinson invited in here, and he could have given us probably chapter by chapter review of Mein Kampf as well. So
he probably could have, yeah.
It would have been very helpful.
I heard he was in the jail cell with Hitler and who's the other guy? Shit.
But yeah, he did. Also, too, if you guys remember in reading, Stalin wiped out. He did a purge of his generals from like 36 to 38, where all of his top, staff that have been with him from the beginning, he purged them all out. Stupid move on Stalin's part. So maybe Hitler also saw maybe inexperienced generals that it wouldn't take much to knock them out of the war because they don't have experienced leadership. So he misjudged that, but that kind of is understandable. Also, the fact that Stalin froze on the morning when he got news of the invasion, he didn't do anything for 3 days.
Yeah, he went away into his bunker
And closed the door and didn't come out for 3 days.
And again, no one wanted to bug him.
Yeah,
no one wanted to bug him. No one wanted to get shot.
Yeah, but do you blame him though?
No, I don't. Same thing with when Hitler, overslept on D-Day. No one wanted to wake him up.
Yeah,
they didn't want to get shot, more or less. Yeah. But yeah,
I think in that case, though, on D-Day, they should have woken up. They should have woken up Hitler.
Maybe just a little.
just jostle him.
He was convinced that it wasn't because they had Patton as the decoy up in the UK, like building up forces. I think on like the eastern coast. I think they were going for Calais.
Yep,
I think
the U.S.
Hitler
first. Yep, the U.S. First Army
because they had inflatable tanks. They had inflatable tanks and like cardboard like cutouts that the German reconnaissance planes would pick up on. And because Hitler respected Patton so much, that he was convinced that that's where it was coming from.
Yeah.
So he's just overslept on D-Day, thinking, "Oh, this is nothing. This is just the invasion before the big invasion."
The low tech camouflage job, just even today, and it's in the movie Patton too. It cracks you up when you see what they did, and they fell for it. It's like amazing. Yeah. Well, they all did. I mean, all the generals thought the same thing, that there is a big army. Patton's leading the main force. Where is it going to land? We don't know. That maybe Calais.
Yeah.
But they duped everyone, and it was a fantastic job.
And wasn't Calais like the one of the closest points between France and England too?
Yep. It is the closest point. Yeah. So that was the other reason as well. But the beaches are terrible and rocky. So and the coast of Normandy, and I was there like 8 years ago. It was fucking awesome. But it's a huge long beach. That you could easily see how thousands of men could come ashore from landing craft. So and it's not like that in Calais. Calais is more of a port. So.
Yeah. Okay. So should we go on to the?
So what do we end up with? Just review the 4 infrastructure.
I think I had the best one because it was the most broad. All of your points went back to mine. So
fence post RA. Fence post.
Yeah. Well, I got to vote for Austin's. I didn't think about the infrastructure and the supply chain, and that absolutely played a huge.
Yeah, I like the oil point.
Yeah.
I took a whole class on just the history of oil in the 20th century in college, and
really,
it is pretty interesting. That was one of the big points in talking about World War II is just Germany's lack of oil.
Subject for next week.
Oh, man.
That would be a great one.
It would be an interesting one.
History of oil in the 20th century. That'd be great.
I hope you kept your notes if we're going to do that.
I'm going to have to go back to my PowerPoints.
Yeah.
Like the Standard Oil. We can start with that. That'd be great. Okay.
Better question.
So, next question.
Right, so RA was Hitler, just to recap. Austin said infrastructure. Then you had
the Navy.
What again?
The lack of proper deployment of the Navy.
That was the lack of proper deployment. I said kind of stole RA and Austin's combined, but essentially basically after the Africa campaign. All right, so and if you think we missed anything, anyone watching, leave it in the comments. Let us know if we might be total idiots and there's some staring us in the face we didn't see. Let us know, and we'll see what you guys come up with. So that was why the Germans lost World War II, or why we think the Germans lost World War II. Now we'll go to the Pacific Theater. So at first, I just want to go around real quick, and it can be quick yes or no, maybe a little bit about why. But I just want to know, do you think dropping the atomic bomb at all was needed? Before we talk, because I know we're going to talk about the second one. Again, today's the 75th anniversary of the first atomic bomb dropping on Hiroshima. So I just want to know, do we think the dropping of the atomic bomb, the first one, any of them, was necessary in World War II by the United States? Austin, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it was. I can go into detail. Yeah, so I thought we were just going to say yes or no. So, I think
just a quick reason. I like to support your answer.
Yeah, I think it was the culture of Japan. They were never going to give up.
They weren't.
Yep. Yeah. All right.
Yes, it saved millions of not only military lives but also civilian lives.
Yeah,
Agree.
I hate to say it, but I have to agree with both of them as well. It was a necessary thing to do to prevent further loss of life.
Yep. Which sounds crazy, right? Dropping nuclear weapons actually saved lives, but I mean, theoretically, you could have been looking at a genocide of the Japanese people, not
Yep.
intentionally, but because they would have fought to the last man to
Right.
defend their homeland.
Yeah.
The U.S. didn't have much of a choice. The projections of an invasion of mainland Japan, for terms of U.S. casualties, was anywhere between 100,000 and a million. So starting on the low end with 100,000, that's a tough starting point. Working from there.
Yep.
Yeah. Especially
all
when
right,
you look
so
at
the first one was dropped on. First one was dropped on August 6th, 1945, on Hiroshima.
75th anniversary today.
Yes, 75th anniversary today. Second one was dropped on August 9th on the city of Nagasaki. That one missed a little bit. That one landed actually a little bit in the suburbs, where the one in Hiroshima landed. There's a bridge that they use as their target, and it hit within like 100 yards of the target. I mean, it was dead center bullseye.
Which for the time, a brand new, the B-29, it's a brand new aircraft. That's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Yes. Yep. So the second one 3 days later, and then Japan within a day or two basically said they were going to surrender, and World War II was effectively over at that time, and the peace treaty was signed, I believe, in September 14th, 15th, somewhere in there. But after the second bomb was dropped, World War II was over, basically.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll just go around again. Do we think the dropping of the second atomic bomb was needed? Do we think it was needed to be dropped on the city? Do we think it was needed to be dropped at all? Let's go right around again. We'll go with Austin. You can start with this again. What do you think?
Yeah, I still think it was probably necessary.
Sorry, or was there a better option? Was there a better option than what they did? Go ahead.
No, maybe not dropping it on the city. Maybe dropping it close to the city over water or something like that. But I think it was still relatively necessary. I mean, I know you guys listen to Hardcore History podcast. And he does a whole podcast. The first episode, he does a whole series of them about the Pacific campaign and the history of Japan leading up to World War II.
I'm on episode 1 of that. I'm about 3 hours into it.
The entire first episode, is all about the culture, and I think it perfectly. He opens up with a story about he was like a private or maybe a sergeant in the Japanese army in Indonesia who up into the 70s was going down to the valley, into the village, and killing people, and wouldn't give up until his superior officer, with orders from the emperor, would tell him to stop.
And they had to drag him in. And he was like a bookmaker or something. Like he was some really just like a random profession. They called him in and just talk to this guy, kind of like Rambo.
Yeah,
it sounded like Rambo. But they have to call in his commander. But that's what they had to do. So that they would fight to the last man. But
he was not the only one. He's just an example.
That's only one example. And I think that mentality was not just in the military. That was the people too. I mean, the people outright supported everything the military did throughout World War II. So I think without dropping the second one, I don't think they would have ever given up. And on top of that, on August 8th, the Russians declared war on Japan and were ready to start invading from the north. And I think that was almost as big of a threat. Not only would it have been a genocide of the people, it would have been a two-front war on Japan, who was just absolutely decimated already. The people would never have given up, and we didn't want to lose Japan to communism either. So I think in hindsight, I think it was necessary.
I got a huge issue with that too. We don't have to dwell on it here, but Russia declaring war on August 8th on Japan after all this time was a pure land grab, sleazebag fucking move. And no one ever calls them out for that, but that was a sleazebag move.
I feel like they've been called out for it.
I don't remember. I don't.
I feel like that's been talked about.
But I hated that. Before I read up on history when I was a kid, I always thought that the Russians were fought with the Allies from the beginning. Well, since they were attacked by the Germans. So it was when I really saw the day before the second bomb. But and I'll just go next real quick because to me this has always been an internal debate, and I don't have an answer because Little Boy was the one dropped in Hiroshima. Fat Man was dropped in Nagasaki. Nagasaki was not the first choice city, and I love Japanese history. And and it's like it's a hobby of mine. And Nagasaki was like, I've never been there, and I've always wanted to visit Nagasaki because that was the port of entry for foreigners during the Tokugawa shogunate. So for almost 300 years, 268 years, all foreigners had to enter through that port. That must have been the coolest place in all of Japan when you think about it. So even though when they opened it up in the Meiji Restoration, I think it was because it was cloud cover over the prime target that they diverted to Nagasaki.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
So it was weather conditions that they had.
Yeah, weather conditions. So I always felt bad that they chose that. Also, Fat Man was a bigger bomb, and it didn't land exactly on target, so it actually killed less people than Hiroshima, than Little Boy did in Hiroshima 3 days earlier. So the conspiracy theorist in me says, would Japan have surrendered? Maybe given another week. I don't know. Maybe because they, when you read the history documents now, the generals were like freaking out, and the emperor was like saying, no more. But it just hadn't gone out through society to like, okay, we've been beaten. Number two, was this a demonstration to Russia to show that we've got two of these fucking things? Maybe. And I'd hate to think that was the case, that we destroyed a city and thousands of people with rate and killed them and doused the area with thousands of I don't know how you measure them, of radiation. So I don't want to think that, but I don't know. But again,
Ned,
we all know the numbers, right? Sorry.
Yeah. Go for it, KDL.
Go ahead.
I tried to turn my. Don't worry about it. I was trying to turn my car on. Didn't work, obviously. But yeah, I just wanted to jump in on that point, Ned. Didn't the Soviets declare war on Russia? Was that right after the first bomb was dropped?
August 8th.
Yeah.
Or so you declare war on the Japanese
2 days later.
In my mind, I think it probably was, right? Because it was Russia declared war on August 8th, and then the second bomb was dropped a day later. I think there's really no way you can look at it and say that wasn't at least a factor in dropping it. For all we know,
I think it was
planning on
Definitely a factor.
There was definitely a factor because they didn't like Austin said, they didn't want to lose them to communism. They take Manchuria, and then they take the northern part of Japan. All of a sudden, you got a Korea situation. So you have communists controlling the north, and then
correct.
South.
Correct.
So that's what
the Russians lost to the Japanese in 1905, and they lost the Kamchatka Peninsula, and part of Russia. So the land grab to go back, that definitely factored into it, because now that I think about it clearly, because Russia jumped in to grab the land back, or Soviet Union did, because they never did look east until later. They were always focused on China, but that's always bothered them that they lost that battle, they lost that war, and they lost that chunk of land to the Japanese in 1905. So this was kind of like, let's get it back. But yeah, but also statistically, the war would not have ended until probably the fall of 1946, maybe even longer.
The invasion of Japan, yeah.
And Ned, going along with you saying that the generals were kind of freaking out about the bombs being dropped. Throughout the Manchurian invasion, the soldiers didn't listen to their generals. They just kept attacking and kept going further and further and further. And that was a huge issue with just their entire plan throughout China, is that they got too spread out. They're too small of a country to control such a large area. Yeah. But the people kept supporting them as the soldiers kept going out, so they couldn't stop doing that if the people. Right. So I'm not sure if they would have stopped fighting. If the soldiers kept wanting to fight, I think they would have kept fighting. Yeah, regardless of whether or not the generals said.
Yeah, in fact, that's a good point, Austin, because I can't recall the name of the battle, but the Japanese and Soviets fought in Manchuria in World War II, and the Japanese initially won, but through the aggression of their own troops, the Japanese generals couldn't hold them back, and they ended up losing the battle and losing all they gained because the troops couldn't be controlled to consolidate their victory, and the Russians just plodded on through and pushed them back. So, good point.
Right.
So I think that
I don't want to. I don't want to say something that hasn't been said already. I couldn't hear you guys for a few minutes. But one thing that I think is kind of underrated in all this, and a reason I think it was necessary to drop the second bomb, is there were still easily over a million. I could even say millions of Japanese troops that were like in Manchuria, still somewhere in mainland China, that were still in the fight. They just had no way of getting back to Japan because the U.S. had, effectively wiped out the Japanese Navy and Air Force, whatever you want to call it. So I mean, the Japanese army in Japan was essentially made up of, reserve soldiers and, really the rest of the civilian population. But in mainland China, they were still essentially fighting until the war ended with, pretty decent sized fighting force. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you consider that, and God forbid they found a way to get back, or there was, if the war didn't draw to an end, for all we know, you take over Japan, and then you still got to go kick them out of China, maybe even after Japan's taken. So
That's true.
And
That's
going
very
off
true.
of that, I think you drop one, and I think everyone kind of waits and see, like, is that one? Do they have any more? Was that the only weapon that they have like that? Once you drop two, I mean, for all Japan knows, we had 10, 12, 20 more just like it. Obviously, we had none, but I think you have to drop the second one. I think the biggest question is, where do you drop it? Over the coast in Tokyo Bay, and an unpopulated area of China, or excuse me, of Japan. That's I think is the biggest question in all this, is the location of dropping the second bomb. I think you have to. I think it just depends where.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point. Yeah, because up north in the northern island of Hokkaido, I think it's not very populated at all. You could have dropped it, up there as well. One thing, did you guys also read too that the decision to drop both bombs were made by the Joint Chiefs? Not Truman just gave his approval since he was not aware of the plans for the buildup as vice president. So when he became president, April 15th. He was made aware of these plans, and it wasn't ready yet, right? But it's almost like the decision was already made to use it once it was ready. Now, the question would be Germany or Japan, but it ended up being Japan. But after one postscript I read even this morning when I was kind of studying up on it is after this, it was Truman who said that only the president can give the order to drop a nuclear weapon. Now I think they've codified it since then, but I think he didn't like the idea that the decision wasn't his. He just had to go along with it.
But also Truman in the Potsdam Declaration, he says, it's unconditional surrender, and I pulled up the quote. Yeah. The alternative to unconditional surrender was prompt and utter destruction.
Right.
And then after the first bomb, Truman said to Japan, I pulled another quote, like, surrender or expect a rain of ruin from the air, the like of which has never been seen on this earth.
Right.
So really, by dropping the second bomb, they're coming through on the Potsdam Declaration. They're coming through on their threat of unconditional surrender, or this is going to happen all day. And like KDL was saying, I think the big part is anything can happen once, anything at all. So after the first bomb, the Japanese are like, whatever, But when they drop that second bomb, the U.S. is saying we can do this all fucking day. And Leslie Groves said that they had more plutonium bombs ready to go. Like the next one was going to be on, I think, August 18th or 19th. And then they had like 3 more in September and then 3 more in October that are going to be ready to go. And Nagasaki and Hiroshima, they're military ports.
Right.
They weren't targeting like major population centers, like KDL was saying. Like they could have gone to Tokyo, they could have gone to Kyoto, they could have gone, and with those next bombs, they would have amped up in magnitude the amount of deaths. So it was the, like you were saying, like the generals were freaking out, but they needed a unanimous decision.
Yeah.
Without the emperor's consent, they couldn't get that unanimous decision. Second bomb drops. 2 days later, they're still debating, and Hirohito steps in and says, "We're done."
Right.
And I think Hirohito is the one who really called, obviously brought the war to the end, because like Austin was saying, and that when you listen to hardcore history, you find out that the emperor was a god.
Yeah, he
spoke on the radio, like the whole
still
country,
is.
like the whole country just
still is.
That was the first time they'd ever heard his voice when they surrendered.
Exactly. They must bear the unbearable.
Part of the peace treaty is they let him continue to be emperor.
Oh yeah.
But they had to acknowledge that he was no longer God. He was a man. That was part.
And MacArthar took that famous photo next to him, where MacArthur's towering over this guy, and it just shows that he's just a small man.
Well, also that was such a staged photo, because if you look carefully, Douglas MacArthur, who was son of a Congressional Medal Award winner, himself, one of the only, I think, 3 or 4 father and son combos, top of his class. I have my own issues with him, but you can't dispute his generalship. He looked disheveled. He was slouching. he was disrespectful. If you look at the body language
Oh
of
yeah,
him,
he did it on purpose.
he did it all on purpose.
Yeah, that was part of the deal. I'm reading the William Manchester book, American Caesar.
Yeah, great book.
I just started. When they're talking about his father in the Civil War right now, but I'm very much looking forward to MacArthur. Reading.
Thank God he didn't grow up in New England because his name was Arthur MacArthur.
I know, right? They're from. They all came from there. They all came from like Springfield, I think.
Yeah, they came from
And they all
Western
moved
Mass.
out to Milwaukee. Yeah.
Right, to get rid of the accent. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Arthur MacArthur. But yeah,
All right,
so
guys.
I think we have
a unanimous decision that we all agree yes on the second one.
Yeah.
So we agree, yes. Do we all agree, was Nagasaki the correct target? I just want to real quick, because again, the reason Hiroshima and Nagasaki were both left untouched really by the firebombing that was going on pretty much through 1944, 1945 was essentially for these two bombs. They wanted a kind of a clean city, a military city, but one that hadn't really been touched yet. Was dropping on Nagasaki, was that the correct target? Austin, what do you think?
I think probably yes. I think if you dropped it like just in Tokyo Bay or something like that, they might have been like, what do you just do? You're just going to drop these bombs wherever? I think you had to send a message, probably put it on a population and wipe them out for that message to really sink in. So I think, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I agree. I like the military target choice. I'm glad they didn't go for, even though Tokyo was already firebombed to hell, but they could have gone for a much larger civilian population as opposed to targeting like a military port, like I had said earlier. But I like they dropped pamphlets. They dropped pamphlets.
Yeah, for days.
Like, hey, by the way, like ungodly fire, like less gross than in Tropic Thunder. It says ungodly rain of fucking fire. That's basically what happened. But I agree with it. I don't think a display of force would have done anything if they exploded over the ocean or something like that. Yeah. They had to go for a city, and I'm glad that, I agree that they chose the lesser civilian casualties to make their point.
Ned?
I don't agree. I don't like I said earlier. Nagasaki, I think, was a very interesting from a historical standpoint city when it comes to Japan. I would have been against bombing Nagoya or Kyoto as well, because Nagoya was the ancient capital, the traditional capital, and Kyoto is where the emperor resides, the chrysanthemum throne sits. So you want to stay away from those two, and I would have stayed away from Nagasaki. I forgot the name of the city that was the first target, though. So like Kokura, which now is a different name. If I think the name is now called something else. So Nagasaki to me would have been it would have been a cool city to visit back then. Knowing that 300 years it was the sole entry of trade, and it was a sole touch point for the outside world for an entire country. That's amazing. So I
really was for the Dutch, because they're the only people they let in.
Yeah, the Dutch were the only ones. Exactly. Yeah.
I think now it's called Kita-Kuchu or something like that.
Huh. Yeah, Ned, I think I'm going to have to agree with you and disagree with the other two, honestly. I think you dropped the first one, obviously, big success from the U.S. perspective, massive casualties from the Japanese side of things. The second one, I like the Tokyo Bay approach personally, kind of a real show of force, show the emperor, show the, what's left of the government, what these weapons actually do after they, heard and maybe saw video clips or whatever. I don't know if they actually even had video clips going at the time, but, they obviously heard about the bomb being dropped back in Tokyo. I think once you show the devastating nature of it, I think that might do it. And then you could always, worst case, if they didn't surrender, like you said already, they had, more bombs being prepared that were going to be ready to drop within the next couple weeks. So then at that point, you could use Nagasaki at that point if you wanted to. So I think I'm with you, Ned. I think I would have used it as a show of force. I think it would have the same effect if it was dropped in part to scare the Soviets a little bit. I think you could have done it and had the same effect. In terms of dealing with the Soviets as well.
No, I think they needed a bloodshed. I think they needed because a show of force. I don't think like Austin was saying, like the Japanese mentality was fight to the last man. I don't.
It's true.
I don't think the only way they would have got that through their head is without bloodshed. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, no, I agree that we should. I think the location is my dispute.
But I'm saying KDL's saying do it in the harbor. He's saying do it in Tokyo Bay.
Yeah.
The second one. I think the second one should, yes.
But why the second one, not the first one? If they want to do a display of force, like they already showed what the bomb can do.
That's kind of true, right?
So why waste on why do the second one?
Right. So because going with your argument, they do fight to the last man. That was their warrior culture. So I think you use the first one on an actual military target like they did, and it shows the devastation it has on actual cities, how it can wipe out an entire city. And then to me, you already proved that. So with the second one, you're showing, hey, we have more of these things and we can use them whenever and wherever we want. That's why. So you show it in your
tactics, I
city,
guess.
and then you show that you have more and more of them. That's what I think that would have done it. And again, like you said, they had more coming, and it would have been another 2 weeks. You wouldn't have invaded at that point. You still would have just been waiting for the next bomb to come up, and then if they still hadn't surrendered, then you could have used it.
I think it was on the 15th. Hirohito told the council we're done, and they said that they had another one ready for the 19th. So had that not come then, they would have expected another one.
Right, within the week.
Yeah. So.
Right.
All right, boys.
All right.
Long show.
So again,
45 minutes.
Anyone watching, let us know what you think. Again, maybe we're completely off. Leave it in the comments. Again, going forward, any ideas you have, you can tweet at us. You can leave it in the comments.
We've had people in our DMs already. If you want to come on, if you've got something we want to talk about, something you want to talk about with us, feel free. We're, like I said, we've had people reach out already. So we're more than willing to talk.
We're kind of playing the hits, right? What does Kirk say? Don't bore us, get to the chorus. We're kind of
exactly
playing the hits now. But, if there's more nitty gritty stuff you want us to get into, or any ideas that you all have for the show going forward, definitely reach out. Any of the four of us, leave a comment on YouTube. Tweet at us, DM us, whatever. Very open to that. Very open to guests, and looking forward to getting some big time celebrities on too. Did someone suggest getting Mike on at some point, or was that a joke?
I thought that was Ned's idea. Ned thinks very highly of Mike since his scumbag comment.
Yeah. He's kind of fallen in my eyes. Exactly. Well, now he's on too much.
It was just out of nowhere. He's like, he just seems like a scumbag.
It seems like a scumbag vibe. I'm like,
the best part was the entire people on it were like, what are you talking about?
yeah, but hats off to Justin. He goes, yep, there you go, shitting on the Minifans again.
Yeah. Yeah. Ned hasn't forgot that. So,
Ned never forgets. Ned
okay, guys.
Good job. So,
we good?
All right. Well,
see you next week.
Week 2.
New topic.
Ideas, let us know, and had a blast. See everyone.
Somebody wrote the history of drywall.
Oh, I know. I've gotten a couple of drywall comments. Trust me, I'm aware. I'm aware. All right. Things take time.
Things take time.
Work in progress.
And on that.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks, Austin. Thank you.
Yeah.